On this Wednesday night, first face-to-face, Biden and Putin's high-stakes talks. The Russian president's deflections, why the American president's not looking to build trust, and was any progress made? The Green Party leader defiant in the face of some who want her gone.
I'm very excited about what is to come.
What's behind the internal turmoil and tension? A powerful farewell speech from an Inuk MP.
I shouldn't be afraid of going into work.
Nunavut's only MP on why she's leaving politics. The cost of living climbs, what's behind the trend and what could reverse it. Plus, a soccer superstar's hard pass on a soft drink and the impact it's had.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Two leaders, two different views of the world, two men who don't speak the same language. This is Joe Biden's first foreign trip as American president, and he agreed to meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who Biden has said he thinks is a killer. Today, Biden said he did what he came to do.
Bottom line is, I told President Putin that we need to have some basic rules of the road that we can all abide by.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The relationship between Russia and the U.S. can have repercussions for the whole world, and so all eyes were on this summit. They talked for about 2 hours. There was no jovial joint news conference afterward. Jackson Proskow was watching from Washington and has our top story tonight.
They've crossed paths before, but never as equals. Their summit was efficient and substantive, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin. U.S. President Joe Biden suggested time will tell.
President Putin and I had share a unique responsibility to manage the relationship between two powerful and proud countries. A relationship that has to be stable and predictable.
Biden came to Geneva looking to put guardrails around Russian activity in Ukraine, in American elections, and around cyber attacks. But in a solo news conference after, Putin quickly returned to old tactics. On cyber attacks, the two countries agreed to consult, but Putin suggested Russia isn't to blame. The majority of cyber attacks are made from U.S. territory, and the second one is Canada, he said. Pressed by American journalists on the jailing of political opponents like Alexei Navalny, Putin responded by pointing to the arrest of the U.S. Capitol insurrectionists and the Black Lives Matter protests. We do not wish that kind of thing should happen on our territory, he said. Biden was far more frank about what should happen if Navalny dies in prison.
I made it clear to him that I believe the consequences of that would be devastating for Russia.
The relationship between the U.S. and Russia has become increasingly strained. Both countries pulled their respective ambassadors earlier this year.
So you know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Putin has been emboldened, having outlasted and at times outplayed a succession of U.S. leaders.
I looked the man in the eye. I found him to be very straightforward and trustworthy.
In a stark break from the cozy and mysterious relationship between Putin and former President Donald Trump, Biden took a more pragmatic view, suggesting he's not looking for friendship or even trust.
This is not about trust. This is about self-interest and verification of self-interest.
From the outset, the White House did not trust that Putin would not try to upstage Biden. They insisted that Putin arrive at the summit site first so as not to keep Biden waiting, and there was no joint press conference. But in a small sign of progress, both leaders did agree to restore their respective ambassadors to embassies in both countries. Donna?
All right, Jackson Proskow, thanks. President Biden says he raised the case of an ex-U.S. Marine who is also Canadian and holds citizenship in the U.S., the U.K. and Ireland. Paul Whalen was detained in Russia in 2018, accused of spying. He was convicted last June and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Whalen maintains he is innocent. He's been pleading with Biden to raise his case with Putin.
So human rights is going to always be on the table, I told him. How could I be the President of the United States of America and not speak out against the violation of human rights?
After the meeting, Putin said there could be a compromise on a prisoner swap. Biden said he would not walk away from the plight of Whalen and another American detained in Russia. Canada's Green Party is in a state of turmoil, and its leader, Annamie Paul, is vowing to stand firm in the face of some in the party who want her gone. She only took over last fall. She doesn't have a seat in the House of Commons, and one of only 3 Green MPs just abandoned the party and joined the Liberals. David Akin joins me from Ottawa. David, Annamie Paul responded to all of this late today. What did she say?
Well, Donna, Annamie Paul is not backing down. She sat through a marathon meeting Tuesday night of the Green Party's governing council, and at the end of that meeting, a motion passed by a narrow vote of 5-4, ordering Paul to publicly rebuke one of her staff members for crossing swords with the MP that defected, that was Fredericton's Jenica Atwin, or Paul would face a non-confidence vote on July 20th that could put her job in peril. Well, Paul spent the day thinking about that threat and then rejected it.
The plan of this small group of councillors who are on their way out did not succeed.
Then, noting that she is the first Black woman, the first Jewish woman to be elected to lead a federal party, she rejected the attempt by those 5 councillors to, as she put it, make her conform to special rules.
I do not need a bespoke set of rules established for me, and I haven't asked for any special accommodation, but I am seeking the same freedom to lead and fulfill my role as leader of the Green Party on behalf of our members. Collaboration and collegiality does not mean bowing down. It doesn't mean being brought to heel.
Strong words, David. So she's defiant in the face of this attempted mutiny by some in the party. What happens next?
Well, this governing council is going to meet again on July the 20th, and if they want to make good on this threat to hold a no-confidence vote and kick Paul out, well, a 3/4 majority will be required at that meeting. And I think Paul has looked at the numbers, and she is convinced that she has enough support on the council to defeat that vote. And she probably wants to end this spat pretty quickly because, as you know, her big task is readying the Greens for a potential general election late this summer, maybe in the fall. And if she cannot strengthen the Greens, well, that would be a net benefit for other parties. In Eastern Canada, Justin Trudeau's Liberals worry about losing votes to a Green surge. In the West, and especially in BC, it's Jagmeet Singh's NDP that is vulnerable to the Greens. So a lot at stake here for all parties as Paul tries to get control of her own party. Donna?
David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. There are new signs tonight. The cost of living in Canada is accelerating. The inflation rate is an indicator of that, and it rose 3.6% last month to its highest level in a decade. It means Canadians are paying more for just about everything. Our senior business correspondent, Anne Gaviola, explains why and what it could mean for interest rates in the months ahead.
The price of many consumer goods collapsed at the onset of the pandemic as people stayed home. Less driving meant dramatically lower prices at the pumps. Bricks and mortar stores shuttered, pushing the price of clothes down. But as more parts of the economy reopen, prices are climbing. Overall inflation jumped 3.6% in May. Nearly half of that was because of energy prices. They rose more than 26%. Food prices climbed 1.5%, and the price of a passenger vehicle, new or used, rose 5%. The hot housing market is reflected in the latest inflation numbers. An item called homeowners replacement is up 11%.
One area of the index that's shown quite a significant increase has been this component which really is tracking what it would cost to replace your home should you have to do so.
This tracks the price of new homes, so elevated lumber prices are reflected there too.
We can't grow a tree within a year, so that might stay for a while.
The global microchip processor shortage, which has driven car prices skyward, could have staying power, but some of the inflationary pressures are temporary.
As travel will reopen, we're anticipating that this will create some inflation, but that will go away slowly as this year finishes and 2022 unfolds.
Economists say as we transition from buying up goods, furniture, sporting equipment, and groceries to services, going out and eating in restaurants, that will relieve some of the price pressures. And this shift could mean more money in the pockets of workers who are in demand.
We are seeing a significant increase in inflationary forces, something that we haven't seen in a while. And the big question is to what extent all those forces will last long enough for the Bank of Canada to start losing sleep over it and start raising interest rates.
And Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Efforts are ramping up to contain the rapid spread of COVID-19 in a remote Indigenous community in Ontario. There's a surge of cases in Saskatchewan, and children account for more than half of the 232 active cases now. Some help has arrived. 15 nurses, 3 paramedics, and another 16 Red Cross members are on the ground. That's according to Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller. He says the virus has spread like wildfire.
This will be a difficult week for Saskatchewan. But there is a real surge of capacity and resources getting in. This outbreak is perhaps a sad reminder that COVID is still here and is very dangerous, particularly if you have not been vaccinated.
Saskatchewan Chief Leo Friday says overcrowding and the lack of places for sick people to isolate is fueling the spread of the virus. Saskatchewan now accounts for a quarter of all active cases reported in Indigenous communities across Canada. The Vancouver couple who chartered a plane to fly to a Yukon community to get vaccinated early have pleaded guilty. Rod and Ekaterina Baker appeared via video link in a Whitehorse courtroom. They pleaded guilty to 2 charges under Yukon's Civil Emergency Measures Act, and they were fined about $2,300. In January, the couple flew to the remote community of Beaver Creek. They posed as motel workers to get vaccine doses meant for locals and ignored mandatory quarantine rules. The federal transport minister says airlines and airports on both sides of the Canada-U.S. border have the wheels in motion now for a phased reopening of international travel, though no timelines have been given.
Certainly, we need to give them time to prepare for reopening, and we feel confident that our partnership with them and their dedicated and committed workers and teams will be ready to work with us.
Details will be unveiled in the days ahead. Life will change for people who are fully vaccinated. As of tonight, just over 14% of Canadians have had both doses. 65% have had at least 1 dose. There is a section of the population, though, who aren't eligible for COVID vaccines, including children under the age of 12. As Heather Yourex-West reports, it's not clear when that could change, and it's leading to lots of questions about summer travel.
1-year-old Willa Stephenson was born shortly before the pandemic began. And over in the UK, her grandparents are anxious for a visit.
They're dying to see them. Like, they change so much when they're so young. And it's really sad. It's sad that, the grandparents are missing out on all this time and all this development and, all the funny things that they do.
But while Mom and Dad will soon receive their second COVID-19 vaccine dose, Willa and her 3-year-old brother remain unprotected. For the Stephensons, it means putting any plans for international travel on hold.
To get on an airplane with our kids, not vaccinated, definitely makes us a bit anxious.
Still, after 14 months of restrictions, many families are eager to make travel plans.
Right now, there's been a huge demand ever since the announcement of last week, where the quarantine is going to be lifted for future travel.
Except that announcement was for Canadians who are fully vaccinated. Kids under 12 likely won't have that option until next year. Until then,
kids will be protected by having the adults around them vaccinated and also by having less COVID in the community as a whole.
International travel is a little more complicated. Kids may be less likely to become seriously ill from COVID, but they could still import new variants.
It's important for we as Canadians to remember that although we're in a good place right now with that third wave coming right down, there are many places in the world where COVID-19 pandemic is still raging.
Concerns Kellner says could be addressed with country-specific travel guidance for families, which could include additional screening and quarantine time for unimmunized kids. The federal government is expected to update international travel and border restrictions soon. Families like the Stephensons hoping those rules provide them with some clarity. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Shelling out cash to help solve a labor shortage. Coming up, how some provinces are trying to entice nurses back to the profession. Plus, parachuting protester, the apologies for this daring stunt. Healthcare workers have faced so much trauma throughout this pandemic. Many are exhausted and some have left the profession altogether. There was already a nursing shortage in Canada, and now it's even worse. As Jamie Morocker explains, some provinces are offering big bucks to try to lure them back.
After 17 months of long, grueling shifts, Toronto emergency room nurse Iram Chagala says she's burnt out.
It's been emotionally challenging, physically draining.
Chagala says nurses are overworked and severely understaffed, and the COVID-19 pandemic has only made the situation worse.
They have decided to leave the profession or are planning to leave the profession very soon.
According to Statistics Canada, in January, for the third month in a row, healthcare and social assistants had more job vacancies than any other sector. Now, provinces are responding with cash.
We've needed to create a number of new positions to manage the volumes.
In Ottawa, the Queensway Carleton Hospital tweeted an offer of $10,000 to any nurse willing to relocate to the region. PEI has been offering a one-time $5,000 bonus for frontline workers who stay for 2 years, while Windsor Regional Hospital is targeting nurses across the border with up to a $75,000 signing bonus.
The government incentives are really to help us not to, steal from Peter to pay Paul, so much as to bring nurses back to our community.
That is short-term band-aid for a long-term problem.
Doris Grinspun, the CEO of the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, wants to see provincial governments focus on base pay, tuition incentives, and professional development instead.
Investments on retention first and recruitment second.
Chagala agrees.
I do think that we should also try incentives to retain our current staff members.
The pandemic hasn't been all bad for the industry. In fact, it's actually boosted enrollment in nursing programs countrywide. In Ontario, 2,000 new educational spots were added in May, but experts say there needs to be thousands more to fill the gap. Jamie Morocker, Global News, Toronto.
Ahead, a powerful farewell from an MP who says she was never welcome in Ottawa. We've made strides in Canada lowering the barriers to running for public office and encouraging a diverse range of people to get involved. But being an MP is not easy, and not everyone who wins an election thrives in Ottawa. The NDP MP for Nunavut is one of them. She has decided not to run again. 27-year-old Momala Kakak from Baker Lake was elected in 2019. She is a proud Inuk woman and the territory's only MP. In her farewell speech to the House of Commons on Tuesday, she said she was racially profiled by security guards and never felt safe or protected. Here is part of her speech.
The federal institution needs to change its own policies and procedures to reflect reality instead of creating barriers for people like me. I shouldn't be afraid of going into work. No one should be afraid of going into work. It is possible to create change. It can be started here in the House of Commons and reflected in Canada. There is a refusal and unwillingness for change, not an inability to accomplish it. People like me don't belong here in the federal institution. I'm a human being who wants to use this institution to help people, but the reality is that this institution and the country has been created off the backs, trauma, and displacement of Indigenous people. Even if we're told we should run, we still face huge barriers. My life in Canada, and especially through this experience, has taught me many things. As a brown woman, do not move too quickly or suddenly. Do not raise your voice. Do not make a scene. Maintain eye contact. And don't hide your hands. Every Inuk has survival mode. We have to. I have heard so many pretty words like reconciliation, diversity, and inclusion. I have been called courageous, brave, and strong by people outside of my party. But let me be honest, brutally honest, nice words with no action hurt when they are uttered by those with power.
A red card for Greenpeace. Next, a protest sends soccer fans to hospital. Soccer players at a Euro 2020 match got a surprise when an activist literally dropped in. A parachutist from Greenpeace disrupted the match between France and Germany. He claims he intended to fly over the stadium but lost control. He almost hit some fans. He ended up landing on the field. Debris fell on the field in the main grandstand, just missing the French manager. 2 people were injured, and the government says police could have shot the activist down. Greenpeace has apologized for the stunt. And one of soccer's biggest stars might have cost Coca-Cola billions of dollars because of his healthy choices. So much for branding. Cristiano Ronaldo urged people to drink water at the European Championship after pushing aside those 2 Coke bottles. Right after his advice, the beverage titan's stock plummeted, wiping out $4 billion in market value. Coca-Cola is a sponsor of Euro 2020, and in a statement it said everyone is entitled to their drink preferences. And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this close-up shot of a hummingbird coming in for a landing in Valemount, BC. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.